So the question about authoritarian populism, broadly speaking, I see it as a response from the ground, right, towards um, the excesses of a technocratic elite that doesn't seem to be, at least from their point of view, doesn't seem to be paying enough attention to the problems on the ground that ordinary people in Singapore face. So there is this image of Singapore, very often externally directed, of that incredibly successful city that a lot of people want to mimic in some way or other, an example, an exemplar of success, and it's externally directed. But the sense that a lot of people on the inside have contradicts that very much. And I guess partly it's that feeling of inequality in Singapore, right? So when you look at the Gini coefficient, for example, it may not seem so bad, right? Singapore is in the 0.4243, and the OECD average is about 0.3233, something like this, right? So it's not terrible, and the numbers themselves, especially after government transfers, don't seem to be getting worse. They seem to be improving. So from that angle, the data would suggest it's not necessarily getting worse. But that's the problem, I think, which is that when elites and technocratic elites talk about a thing like inequality, they tend to resort to data. They tend to resort to numbers. And they tend to do it in a way that seems to trivialize the lived experience of ordinary people. It's almost like saying, okay, so you are saying you're having a hard time coping with life. But the numbers here show that you're not. You're actually not, it's not that bad, right? And that can be a terrible thing for a person to hear, right? Can be a terrible thing for a person to hear, especially in a time like this with COVID, pandemic, and so on. People are really struggling. And then to hear that expressed in that way. At the same time, in the last, 10 years, 15 years, Singapore's, again, a city, right? It's a very dense city. So when we think about inequality, you're thinking about an experience of difference within a very congested space. Across the street from where you are is multi-million-dollar housing. On the roads, you'll find, and I think this is documented, right? Singapore is among the highest rates of luxury cars per road space. So you'll see all this, and then meanwhile you're told to go car light, right? To take public transport. And there was a time not too long ago when the public transport broke down very often, and one of the reasons for that was in the 90s, 2000s, not enough. There were not enough investments into the infrastructure. There was too much focus on the retail aspects of the infrastructure and all of that. So again, the capitalistic orientation. So, the experience of the ordinary person in Singapore is different from what the numbers might suggest. It's different from the image that represents Singapore globally. And then to be told that, you should be thankful for how things are in Singapore, I think it grates very badly. So when enough people feel this way, they need to channel this frustration somewhere, right? And the authoritarian populism part of it comes in with, I suppose, the political opportunities that present themselves. When you have angry, frustrated people who don't know where to express this frustration, and because meritocracy has divided everyone into competing individuals, it's kind of just festering. And these are the conditions in which a demagogue can very easily come in, play with latent xenophobia and racism in order to maximize their own political capital and gain politically. And this can come from the political opposition as well as the political establishment. So I'm seeing the beginnings of this. Now, Singapore is very careful because we have a long tradition of multiracialism, and we're very cautious about racism and such things, right? So, because we're so careful about racism and all of that, one consequence of that is that we bury a lot of the um, uh, um, uncertainties and the fear of otherness in the collective unconscious, right? And that's dangerous because it's kind of subterranean, right? And all it takes is for some episode with a racial element to come about, a demagogue to capitalize on that, and you're going to get the kind of a right institution. So to me, the populism is like this, right? Specific to Singapore, and it's divisive. And as a result of it being divisive like this, and in some sense irreconcilable, you're not going to get a revolutionary change. You're not going to get the kind of reform that's necessary to rebalance Singapore's obsession with the orthodoxies of neoliberal globalization. Instead, you get parties, holding on to their positions in tighter and tighter ways, and that's sclerotic to me. So it's either going to be decadent, or it's going to be politically inflammatory. The socialist legacy, I think, is all but lost. I don't even think it's spoken about officially. The feeling, even in space, in the islands of socialism that we still see, such as public housing and health and all that, is still discussed in terms, well, it's universal, available to all, but it's discussed in terms of how do you make the process efficient, right? The concern is about the administering of these services. How do you minimize cost? How do you ensure that people are responsible when they use these services, right? Co-payments. How do you ensure that people don't abuse the system? Right? So it's a very pessimistic view of human nature as kind of exploiting and abusing whatever public good is available to them. So I think a lot of that is in the official thinking, at least, it's gone. The education of a lot of our political leaders also doesn't include that socialist tradition. And then the voices within the system who are more progressive and who I think must have tried along the way to make a change have been smothered. In the subtitle of this proposed book that I'm working on is what I'm kind of clumsily at this time calling neoliberal populism. And that sort of takes into account, I think, what you're pointing to, which is usually when you think of authoritarian populism, you think of populist parties and sort of fringe parties that gain ascendancy because they know how to tap into the fears, the xenophobic fears and the racism of people. But we also see that in the Singapore case, that the establishment itself is not immune to authoritarian populist behavior, right? Except they're much more careful and I think they have more confidence that they're able to control this monster. But I want to try and see if I can think of it not so much as authoritarian populism as a dialectical response to neoliberal globalization, but to see if some kind of hybrid thing is happening in Singapore where the neoliberal part takes on authoritarian populist dimensions too, and if I could call that something like neoliberal populism. So I guess my answer is I'm thinking about that very carefully, but I don't have the answer to it yet.